Jamie, unmute. I'm delighted to welcome you, and here's our picture again. Let's talk about why we're here. It's an existential question we can approach as only adult educators can. We're really here because this whole process of examining rigor needs connections in real time. It's terrific for us to be able to do the reading, to have opportunities to watch recordings, but that real-time connection is really what creates an awareness that a lot of this is already being done in our classrooms or with our learners in our programs, and allowing us to connect together and decide how we might just tweak makes all the difference. One of the things we're going to be doing today, beyond just the connection in real time, and for those of you listening to the recording, still a valid connection, identifying the context and needs of our learners that relate specifically to the need for increased rigor. We're going to launch our exploration of rigorous instruction, and then we'll preview the agenda and materials for our work together on December 5th. So that's the essence of why we're here today. Along those lines, and it's always very important to, something went away, let's see, there we go. It's very important to do needs assessments, not only in our classrooms, but for ourselves, so that we know who we are and what we need. So if you would just complete this poll, it would be terrific. And you should be able to watch this populating live in front of you. Right now we're 5 ESL teachers to 1 coordinator to 1 administrator to 2 teacher advisors. We've gained another ESL teacher. You may be wearing, as I tend to, multiple hats, and if that's the case, please feel free to vote as many identities as are written down here for yourself. And I'm now going to try really hard to do the math. Let's just see. We have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 19, 20. So let's see if we're adding up to 20. Not quite. We've got 14. So we're waiting on 6 people. I'm not going to let it go too much longer because it does get old. But let me show you a broadcast so you can see. So based on what you see here, what can you infer about our group? Just type a statement that's something you would infer looking at the results of our poll. Okay, so Thomas is saying that there's a big interest by ESL teachers. That would have been my first inference, and Quinn is saying the same. This is actually different from the other 2 rigor workshops that have gone on, and I know we will have more ABE teachers as we progress, but it's very interesting because in the northern webinars we had pretty much 50-50 of ABE, ASE, HiSET, and ESL. Judy, I like your inference. That's terrific. So we certainly have a number of teachers who are interested in improving, refining, I like to say, refining skills. Let's try another poll and see what you think about that. This gives me a little bit of an idea of how you perceive your learners, and also a concept of the variety of proficiencies regardless of whether or not, and if, by the way, if you are not in a classroom, let's talk about the learners that you interact with most. Okay, and I'm seeing that this is not filling in as quickly, and that may be because many of you are not in the classroom. But it looks, based on this, what statements could you make? Based on the evidence we have here, what statements could you make about our group? So Meredith is writing. Multiple attendees are writing. Terrific. And for those of you that are not typing, but did Javier and Iris in particular, Veronica has clarified, I see that Iris saw that, about the PowerPoint/information sheet. Ah, Quinn, interesting. So we need to work with our students to increase their proficiency. We see some students we see our students as having some skills in English. So that's true. No one checked off the not at all proficient. So this type of activity is rigorous in a particular way, in that I am asking you to look at data and make a statement about that data using the data as evidence. And then this is important for me to know as we move forward. With which of these are you very familiar? And very familiar would mean not that you have to open a vein and you see it all in there, but that you're conversant about these particular elements of adult education. So it looks like we had 3 that said the CCRS, and then it went down. So people are reevaluating. So it looks like our strongest suit is in WIOA. Now there are 20 of us, so there should be, hopefully, I guess if someone is not feeling very familiar with any of these, that's a valid response. But I will promise that by the end of our time together, you will feel, if not very familiar with all of these to some degree. Project-based instruction perhaps a little bit less, but we'll have the materials to help you become a little more familiar with that. And Mary Louise, we did mention that, so hopefully people picked up on that. I'm hoping that they did. Okay, so it does definitely look like WIOA has made the rounds. And one of the important readings that you'll do between now and when we meet on the 5th will be the excerpts from the College and Career Readiness Standards and the English Language Proficiency Standards for Adults. And the reason that we're asking you to read the excerpts rather than the entire document is because those excerpts really give you the raison d'etre, the reason for the occurrence of both of those sets of standards, and the rationale for adult learners at this time needing these skills that the standards support. And in terms of task-based instruction, we'll be working very, that will actually be the engine for the way that we proceed in our face-to-face training. So now I'm going to give you a little quiz, and I'm not asking you to type in your responses, but I am asking you to just reflect. Maybe you want a piece of paper so you can kind of keep track. True or false, you have a 50-50 chance. I will not reveal the answers. These are answers that will come to, I hope, by the end of our workshop on December 5th. So true or false, academic skills are important for career training. I'm going to move rather swiftly through these. True or false, WIOA requirements include rigorous instruction. Now don't be answering these questions in the chat because these are for you to be thinking about. Okay, Quinn. Now see, we don't know which one you answered and we don't want to give away answers. Just write it on a piece of scrap paper so you can get the sense of participating, but we're going to keep it all to ourselves at this point. True or false? More work plus homework equals rigor. True or false? Providing instructional support or scaffolding, and we're going to use that term quite a bit throughout our time together, means a diminution of rigor. True or false? This is particularly important for our group because we have, at this point, more ESL teachers. Adult ELLs can meet challenging academic standards. But think about this as well, for those of you with colleagues in ABE, many of the learners in ABE are also ELLs. So this goes across contexts. True or false, increasing rigor means having high expectations of learners. True or false, rigor is not for everyone. And we'll revisit those questions at the end of the workshop on December 5th. But these are questions that occur pretty regularly in all professional development around rigor. They're concepts that you'll be addressing. And I'm going to do a little overview of why rigor now and where it comes from. That will, to some degree, answer some of those questions, and you can validate your responses. Before we go to the mini lecture portion, let's do a brainstorm, two actually. What are your learners' goals? Go ahead and type in the window at the very bottom where you see the little dialogue balloon, and your answers will appear underneath the question. So we're going to play a little music. I'm just going to give you 2 minutes for this brainstorm. Actually, probably 90 seconds. So go. Oops, I can't play the music. Winnie, you have to play the music. Carmela, if you could you, don't put it in the main chat pod, guys. Put it over here where it says learner goals. Look at the window where it says learner goals and you see your colleagues are typing things in. Carmela, if you could just move yours over, or I can move it over there for you. And Annabelle has demonstrated you can type in more than one response. Thank you, Carmela. We can scroll through this and you can take a quick look at what others have said. I'm just going to read them out quickly just so that anybody who is on the phone and can't see has a chance to hear the brainstorm. So get a job, enter the workforce, get a job or better job, employment with overtones of mobility within the field, get a better job, improve English, get a better job, become comfortable communicators in English, communicate with their children's teachers, get a GED certificate, easily converse with native speakers while at work, help students transition. I think that's the idea of being able to transition, speak, understand, and be understood, earn a living wage to support their families, accelerate their learning, help children with homework. So we've had jobs and parenting, frequent and transitions, and obviously the key skills of communication. Converse with native speakers more easily, again, helping children with school and enter college, or also, oh, there's more, sorry, get a high school diploma or equivalency, job training in a short period of time. Very important concept there, Beth, the time frame, within 6 months, and employment. Learn English and work in their field, work and prepare for college training and speak more fluently. Yes, so Iris, I understand what Iris is saying is that the idea that learners would like to be able to work in the field, the fields in which they have degrees from their own country. Okay, so we now have a wonderful list, and I didn't have to tell you these things. We have a wonderful list of the goals that our learners have. I'm sure that you could think of more as well. By the way, just so you know, all the PowerPoint presentation materials from today, as well as everything that is written in the chat window on the right, and the brainstorms and another activity that we're going to do will all come to you following the webinar at the latest by tomorrow or Friday. So let's take a look at knowing what we know our learners want to be able to do. What skills do they need to meet those goals? So let's try the music again for 90 seconds and go forth. Brainstorm. Veronica, welcome. Participants are brainstorming skills that learners need to meet their goals. So feel free to type the window beneath where you see their answers coming up. Welcome, Debbie. Okay, so let's take a look and see what these skills are that you've mentioned and think about what categories they fall into. So Carmela said proficiency in English. Joy said critical thinking to solve real-world unpredictable problems. Imelda said reading proficiency. Javier said good listening, writing, and speaking. Tanya said academic and occupational, I'm guessing, skills. Thomas said better reading comprehension. Then he said speaking, listening, reading, and writing skills. Mimi said listening comprehension. Imelda said math skills. Carmela said occupational training. And he said critical thinking skills. Gray mentioned speaking skills. Looks like, I'm sorry, because people are typing, it's coming up a little strangely, but social skills, good communication skills, job skills. Judy mentioned that they need to know how to articulate their thoughts, increase their vocabulary, work on pronunciation, gain the confidence they require to initiate and sustain conversation, soft skills, reading, writing, listening, and math skills, time management. Eduardo mentioned that, which goes under soft skills, also is an important, it can be a technical skill. Javier mentioned intrapersonal skills, not just inter. Technical skills attainment, career and educational training, soft skills. You guys have to stop typing because I can't keep speaking. 4 skills and updated vocabulary, tech skills, soft skills. Beth mentioned the soft skills are a must with interpersonal basic math, writing, and typing. And Annabelle put employability skills, which covers, actually, if you look at the employability skills framework, it covers many of the things that you've already mentioned. And interview skills, Debbie put in there. So we know they need these skills. And we are but one person in their lives. So actually the intrapersonal skills that I think Javier mentioned, the agency and self-sufficiency skills, that learners need, efficacy, self-efficacy skills that learners need, are almost on par with the communication skills they need, because a lot of what learners have to do, they need to do through their own inner motivation. So we are there as facilitators, but we certainly can't just open them up and provide the skills. So this is an important element of rigor, and I will share all these with you. And it would be interesting, I think, for you at one point to look through and see which of the skills fell under which categories. How many people felt that the employment skills were the majority of the most important focus, and how many people felt the academic skills were the most important focus, because that kind of gives you a picture of how we feel differently in the way that we approach our teaching. So let's take a look about what we already know about rigor and struggle and success. I'm going to just get rid of this for us right now. And as Winnie mentioned, you can make this screen larger if you'd like, using the little arrows up at the top. From the Glossary of Educational Reform, we know that academic rigor challenges students to meet high standards and high expectations while providing the support necessary for success. So there is a concise definition, in a way, of rigor, that it's a challenge, and it's high standards and high expectations with support. There's a difference between providing learners with an exercise and a problem, and I'm going to give you a moment to just read this silently. And then for those of you on the phone, rather than not able to see the screen, an exercise is a question that you know how to resolve immediately. Whether you get it right or not depends on how expertly you apply specific techniques, but you don't need to puzzle out what techniques to use. In contrast, a problem demands much thought and resourcefulness before the right approach is found. So is there a type of thinking that you could relate to the problem? Anybody want to post that in the chat? Is there a term that we use for the type of thinking that goes along with the problem solving? See Meredith writing. Yes, that's exactly right. Critical thinking. Higher order thinking is another way to put it. And the question I just asked you was a convergent question. It was, in fact, not a critical thinking question. It was a question that had a right answer. So this is something that we're going to be looking at as well, is how do we merge convergent and divergent questions, questions that have that answer and questions that have multiple answers that learners have to defend. This is part of the rationale of why we would be thinking about rigor. Our students face a complex, rapidly changing work environment that requires high-level content knowledge and skills in technology, communication, and problem solving. But let's roll it back a little bit. Betsy Parrish, who is a subject matter expert, a wonderful, wonderful resource, and if you would like to read an issue brief on her work, we will have that available, but it's part of the Links ESL Pro, Meeting the Needs of Today's Adult English Language Learners. She states that rigor is part of everyday literacy tasks, and I think this is so important for those of us that are working with learners who have limited English proficiency. You know, when learners are reading mail selectively, they're listening and taking notes on important messages, when they're assisting their children with homework, when they're attending a neighborhood meeting, interacting with teachers at school conferences, making healthcare decisions, those are tasks that require rigor, that can create a struggle on the part of the learner, and that the learner can be successful with. Give me a little check next to your name. If you remember how to do the check, it's under the man with the hand raised. So give me a green check if you have heard about Carol Dweck and growth mindset. So you just go, there's a little man with a raised hand, and you do the downward facing arrow, and then you click on that, and there's a green check will come up. Okay, Gonhi, you gave me an X. Not sure if that means that you haven't heard of her. And Annabelle, you've not. Okay, I'm guessing I'm guessing the X's are not versus checks, but well, Debbie has. And this Carol Dweck is a wonderful resource for helping us understand how our learners are going to succeed in this process. The concept of a growth mindset is that we help our learners persist. We help them recognize the need for a commitment to learning. We help them recognize the importance of taking informed risks and learning from those results, helping our learners understand that failure is as much a part of learning as success is, and that failure breeds success. So that is the growth mindset. If a learner believes that he or she has a fixed amount of intelligence, and when they reach that point where all they're doing in their mind is failing, and they think, I can't go any further, that's called a fixed mindset. A growth mindset is when the learner recognizes that the failure is one step towards growth. And there's some interesting material out there to help learners understand how they can adapt this type of mindset. This is some of the language, and now it could be that obviously our English language learners may not use this language in English, but they're saying their self-talk is this in whatever their first language is. So if they're saying, I'll never be as smart as she is, this is too hard, I don't understand, I'm just not good at this, I make too many mistakes, we can help them reframe their thinking. And I don't know, Thomas, if you are, yes, Javier. I agree. I don't know if you're raising your hand or if you're doing a high five. So remember what I was speaking about earlier with questions and the closed-ended versus the open-ended questions. When learners believe that there is only one answer and they get that answer wrong, then that starts leading to a more fixed mindset. Yes, we need to have questions that have a yes or no answer, or that have an A, B, C, or D answer. Those questions are important, and they help learners recall information. But we really want to move from convergent questions to more divergent questions and give learners an opportunity. Oh yes, Thomas, I just saw your question. I'll answer it in a minute. Give learners an opportunity to defend their answer and possibly reveal an answer that we hadn't even thought about or that no one else had thought about. And Thomas's point of doesn't confidence building play a part? Absolutely. Confidence building is part of the scaffold that we provide during rigorous instruction and rigorous work. So we scaffold, we provide step by step, or we provide sentence frames, or we provide elements of instruction that guide the learner through the more rigorous rapids of the river of instruction. That just came to me, and I'm sorry it did. But if you do think of it as navigating rapids, we're going to put the learner in a life jacket. So just something to consider. Before you ask the question, ask yourself, does the question draw out and work with students' prior knowledge? Does it raise the visibility of the key concepts that you're teaching, that the students are reading about, that they're listening to? Will the question stimulate peer discussion? Would you want to answer that question? And probably, this should probably go right up at the top. Is it clear what the question is about? And to that end, actually, it's very, very, very important to plan your questions. Sometimes they will just emerge, but it's that higher level thinking question, the critical thinking question that you want to ask, that's where our planning comes in as instructors. And if that's not something you've been doing a lot of, that's okay. More and more textbooks are putting those in there, but they're not necessarily going to be where you want them to be. They might not be next to the reading. So think in terms of looking at your material and coming up with one divergent question. That's right, Thomas. It is effective questioning, absolutely. And Annabelle is referring to funds of knowledge, which is one of the 10 guiding principles of the English Language Proficiency Standards. So we want to draw on our learners funds of knowledge, their prior knowledge, when we engage them in the questioning process. Now, Joan Bowler is very interesting. Her research is very interesting. She's a mathematician, as is the next gentleman I'm going to share with you. And this is, I think, very important for us to share with learners. Research shows that when we make mistakes, which indicate struggle and challenge, the brain grows. Actually, neural pathways occur, not neural pathways that are going to the mistaken knowledge. Actually, the brain recognizes the mistake before we do. And so it tries to make connections to the correct answer. This is Jason Moser's better articulation of what I just said. When we make a mistake, synapses fire, electrical signals move within the brain signifying learning. And this happens whether we pay attention to the mistake or not. And I think that is really exciting. There's a lot to be read on this. We're not focusing on it, but I think it's just very, very useful information because our learners, I think all learners, but our learners as adults, they relate to adult learning theory, and they need to know the relevance of what they're learning. And mistakes are only relevant to them if we can prove that they result in learning. And so research shows that, and I think it's worth sharing. So that's kind of a little foray into Rigor and what Rigor does with the brain, and the idea of the challenge and the struggle, and hopefully the success that results from challenge and struggle. But how do we even get here? Why are we even talking about this? Right, Thomas. Thomas is mentioning that mistakes are not errors, but opportunities to learn and understand. So as I go through this, would you please participate at your highest mental level? Every time I say something that you already know, just make a little note to yourself saying, pat yourself on the mental back and say, I knew that. And anytime I say something that's new or vaguely interesting, just tell yourself rather, quietly, that's new or vaguely interesting. In other words, engage. So there have been shifts in adult education, and I know those of you that have some familiarity with the College of Career Readiness Standards know about this, and many of you indicated that you are familiar with WIOA, and that also includes these shifts. We are moving from siloed elements of adult education to an integration. So we're looking now at all of these content areas coming into all of our contexts. We're also looking at the integration of transition skills at all levels. That was something that you brought up in the Brainstorm. So we're not waiting until a learner is in advanced ESL or in ABE to start talking about transition. We are working with their goals. And those goals need a level of transitional skill work. One of the things that we've really done is become aware that intentional instruction is key. In order for learners to meet the challenge, we have to provide it. So we need to provide learners, and a number of you mentioned this already, they need the language to demonstrate their higher order thinking and problem-solving skills. And Thomas, that's maybe something we can talk about. Thomas is asking about student retention. And student retention actually does come through this challenge, because when learners see the progress that they make in their ability to communicate how they already think, this is a big deal. We don't want to convey to our learners that we are teaching them higher level thinking. They are higher level thinkers. They may not have higher level thinking in every aspect, but they're already living rigorous lifestyles, and they're already using problem solving and higher level thinking. What they may not have is the language to express it. We also want to focus on the depth of knowledge. So we're climbing high, but we're also diving deep. So it's not so much that we're staying at the lowest level. Yes, and Quinn is talking about the importance of context. So that's where this comes in, the depth of knowledge. So we're trying to move away from rote memory and surface level understanding. Whatever is needed within the particular objective, we want to provide that. But we want to get learners into reading closely, diving deeply into whatever they're listening to. Really, questions that are worth asking, readings that are worth, texts that are worth reading or listening to or viewing. And we've had a shift in the relationship between acquiring language proficiency and acquiring content knowledge. Used to be first English language proficiency, then you get some content. But if you look over at the parallel relationship, you can see that content and English language proficiency are moving back and forth. One informs the other. We're also prioritizing content-rich informational text. Now, in the next couple of slides, you're seeing on the left the College and Career Readiness Standards document and the English Language Proficiency Standards document. And those two highlight the prioritization of content-rich informational text. And when I talk about text, I am not just referring to print at all. I'm talking about multimedia. I'm talking, it can be a learner's, a student's oral report, podcast, a video. We're also emphasizing academic language. We're teaching it explicitly. We're encouraging its production, and we're choosing text with examples of it. So as you can see, the young woman on the right is saying, why don't we examine this section first? Instead of, why don't we look here? We're going to focus on textual evidence. So we're going to require the use of text to help support claims or conclusions. So when I asked you to make inferences from our polls, I would have given you a frame that said, based on X, I believe Y. And that would give you a way to frame your thinking. The College and Career Readiness Standards for Adult Education are signaling an upward shift in knowledge, skills, and abilities that our students must develop. So by virtue of having these standards, we know that our path is laid out. The students need these skills, and these standards help us achieve those, help our learners achieve those skills. We're going to help them by increasing the language demands across content areas, and we're going to identify specific language and analytical practices that they need to perform. So we're going to make that part of our lesson instruction. And the shifts extend not just to the CCRS, but to the English language proficiency standards that support the CCR standards. So the goal of this document is to help learners achieve those CCR standards, help English language learners achieve those standards. And we know that English language learners are not just in ESL classes. They're across our context in adult education. So these proficiency standards provide scaffolds for all learners. So in that last little overview, we've talked about the rigor, the struggle, and the success that is part of 21st century adult ESL instruction. We talked about the shifts of moving towards more text complexity in academic language, building learners' knowledge, and helping learners cite evidence. And we talked about a little bit the College of Career Readiness and English Language Proficiency Standards. If you are not feeling that these are three concepts, although the top one is three concepts in and of itself, if you're not familiar with these three areas, the material that we're suggesting you read between this webinar and our meeting on the 5th will build your familiarity on that. And I just want to mention that Quinn is talking about students' response to higher expectations. There's actually research that shows that adult learners, it almost seems counterintuitive, but that adult learners really respond to a challenge. What we have to be very careful about is the high level of frustration. That's not what we're after. We're for the struggle, but not the frustration. Some frustration, of course, goes along with the struggle. But if we see that learners are getting too frustrated and they're shutting down, that's the time to build up the scaffolds. So I have mentioned that early on that you are already doing a lot of this in your curriculum. And I think, exactly, Thomas is saying lower the affective filter. I think that if we do this mixer, you're going to find even more of what you're doing. So there are 4 questions in this mixer. You can start anywhere you like, but the goal is to write in each one of these 4 quadrants. The first question is, what's one topic in your curriculum that's challenging and high interest? The next question is, what's one question you ask in class that prompts thoughtful responses from your learners? The next question is, what's a tool or technique that you use to help learners navigate complex text? Now remember that complex text is not only print. It can be, a web page is print, but online print. It can be media. It can be a picture. It can be audio. So there are a lot of different things that you can use to help your learners navigate those. And the very last one is, what's a task that you've done with your learners that gets them to an aha place? So I'm going to give you 4 minutes for this activity. Should be about, if we need a little more time, we'll take it, but I think 4 minutes should do it. And I'm hoping that everyone will write in all 4, but at least write in 2. Any questions, Tommy? Any questions? So I'll answer them if you put them in the chat box. Let's go. Okay, I know you guys could keep doing this and keep doing it. And certainly as I'm talking about what we've written here, you're welcome to keep writing, but you might want to scroll up and down and see what your colleagues have said. This is one way for you to participate. We'll do a lot more of this type of participation when we're face-to-face. I wanted to point out Judy's question, what sort of future do you imagine for your children, as being a really mind-expanding question. And it's certainly something that doesn't have any context in terms of, if it was not your children, it could just be for the, what kind of world for the children of the future, if you had very young people who were not looking at being parents. But that's the kind of question that's a little different and isn't focused on how do you conjugate the verb to be. Carmela's, if you could do one thing over, what would it be? These are high-stake questions. They're asking the learner to think a lot about how they want to respond. And it's very possible that learners wouldn't have enough language to respond, and that's where the scaffolds would come in. So you could provide them with a lot of language, give them an opportunity to use bilingual dictionaries, help them so that they are able to do what Quinn said earlier on, which is really be able to express themselves. Let's take a look at some of the tasks that people have done. Wendy comments on the idea of starting from a lower order thinking and then transitioning to higher order thinking. That's a perfect scaffold. That's allowing the learners to, quote unquote, get it right and then start working on more and more of the challenge. And Quinn's comment about the high interest readings, that's actually something that will make learners interested in persisting in the challenge. If they're interested in the content, then they're motivated to do the reading. And also, the more times we attack the reading, so it's not just a one and done, but we read it for one purpose, and then we read it again for another purpose. Each time we attack the reading, the learner is picking up more and more information. Thomas's point of trying to explain things in multiple ways, that's certainly, I would say that goes more to the text complexity, the tool side of things, but having tasks that approach different learning styles or different, having different steps, different ways of doing something within a single task allows learners with different strengths to use those strengths, and where they're weaker, perhaps their colleagues that can buoy them up. And as you go through these, you see so many different ideas. So I want to really applaud your funds of knowledge, applaud your prior knowledge, and ensure that we are all on the same page, that as professionals, we have been providing rigorous instruction. What we're hoping to do now is tweak our work so that it's rigor that matches the rigor of the 21st century. So let's take a moment and see how we did in terms of meeting our goals. We have connected in real time, and I really thank those of you that have been on the chat as well. That's a great way to keep connected. We've identified context and needs through the polls, but I think we'll do more of that when we come together. We've certainly launched our exploration of rigorous instruction. We haven't hit that last bullet, previewing our agenda and the materials for our work together on December 5th. So if you look down below the revisiting our today's goals window, and you see a handouts window, you see 4 items there, and you can download those. You can select them and download them to your computer. That's the extract of the English Language Proficiency Standards that I mentioned earlier, the extract of the Cognitive Readiness Standards that I also mentioned, and then information on the session on the 5th as well as the campus map. Winnie is going to put in the chat pod, she's going to put 2 links. One is to a webinar on the CCRS, and one is to a webinar on the ELPS. And you can copy and paste that onto a note in your on your computer. And then if you would like more information about CCRS and ELPS, that's another way to get it, is through these webinars as well. So where we're going to go from here is thinking in terms of what we've done today as laying the groundwork. Our face-to-face session will be digging in. So that's when, you know, it's a whole day's work together. We do a lot of teamwork and tasks. There's also a lot of opportunity for questions. And then after that, you've got a period of time, 2 or 3 months, where you are going to apply what you've learned, what you're interested in pursuing. And then in the spring, April or May, we'll all come back together, but it won't just be this Southern California group. It will be all the AEBG groups that have participated in this training will all come together on a webinar and share some of the highlights of what it is we've done. So there's an element of rigor in this whole training event in terms of where there's a challenge to you of putting these ideas into play in your classroom and then coming back and letting people know how it's gone. Our training on December 5th, on Tuesday, will take us through these 6 areas. We're going to experience rigor firsthand, as if we don't have enough of it. We'll correlate rigor to the standards, the CCR and the ELP standards. We'll identify the myths and strategies around rigor. We'll actually do some video observation of classes and lessons, looking at the rigor or lack thereof. We're going to do something that I think you'll enjoy very much, which has to do with making the rationale for rigor clear to your learners. So it's about how do you present this concept of challenge as being important, the research. How do we do that with our learners? And so that's a task we'll do together. And then, obviously, the ultimate goal and part of our training is how can we integrate rigor into instruction. So you'll be looking at a lesson that you bring in that regard. So before the 25th, boy, I just moved right to Christmas. Before the 5th, I would like you to view the webinar if you're unfamiliar with CCRS, and you've got the link down there, and read the introduction to the ELP standards or the CCR standards documents. I recommend reading both just because I think it's great to have that synthesis. Then I would like you to bring a lesson or practice task that you'll be teaching in December or January. And I know it's tricky with December because there's testing and there's all kinds of things going on. So if you want to think in terms of what you'd be doing after the winter break, that's fine too. Bring a device because we are going to integrate technology, knock wood, she said. So a laptop, a tablet, or a smartphone. And please bring an open and inquiring mind. I want to share with you that we are meeting in the student lounge, which is Q. And you have this map, without the circles, but you have this map as part of the downloads below. So we're meeting in the student lounge, which is Q, which is the blue square. And then where I have indicated in red is the parking. So it would be lot H and lot G. If I were doing it in alphabetical order, it would be lot G and lot H. But I tend not to do things in order. So, with 1 minute to go, I can tell you that our next time, face-to-face, will be on Tuesday, December 5th at the Compton College Student Lounge. We'll be looking forward to seeing all of you there. And I know we have a few people that are watching on the recording right now, and we'll see you there as well. Our time is from 9 to 3, but I really encourage you to get there well before 9 because we start right at 9. And there is coffee. There will be coffee. And any questions that you have, I'll stay on for a little while longer, but would you please acknowledge one person in the chat pod from the attendee list. So for example, Annabelle might acknowledge Tom, etc.
So thank you, Jamie. After today's engaging session, and we'll call it a Rigor appetizer, we look forward to seeing everyone on Tuesday at Compton College's Student Lounge. You can download those handouts from the center handouts box. Also be aware that lunch will be provided for you, and you'll have a continental breakfast as well. And AEBG has an evaluation that will automatically pop up at the close of the webinar. If you have to leave before it closes, you will receive an email from AEBG containing the link to the evaluation survey. So have a great weekend, and we look forward to seeing you all bright-eyed on Tuesday, the 5th of December. Thank you.